Okay, hello again. So I've got another book review, and this one is Alchemy: The Surprising Power of Ideas That Don't Make Sense by Rory Sutherland. Rory Sutherland's a really interesting guy, vice chairman of Ogilvy in the UK. He's got loads of stuff on YouTube. It's really worth checking out. He's had some good interviews. He does some really interesting talks. Um, I decided to do this book review today. I read this, well, I listened to it actually on Audible. It's narrated by him as well. He's got a great voice. He's a bit of a Mr. Toad sort of character. He's quite eccentric, but really interesting. Um, and I was inspired to do the review today because I went up to Asda. I braved going up to the supermarket with this COVID-19 stuff going on. It wasn't particularly pleasant. They're sort of doing queuing systems up there, and everyone's obviously keeping their distance, which is good to see, but obviously it's still quite worrying. Didn't really want to be up there at all, but can't get an order at the minute online, so we needed a few bits, so just went up there really carefully and did that. But you go up and down the aisles and kind of get what you can as carefully as you can and stuff. And it was amazing because I got to the end of the shop. As I turned the corner, I came upon an aisle that was full of toilet roll. And I was absolutely amazed and I couldn't believe it. And it felt as though I'd found the Holy Grail because for a couple of weeks now I haven't been able to get any toilet roll. Luckily, we've got enough just about to sort of do us. But I haven't been able to find any for ages wherever I've been. The shelves have been completely empty, and I just found this toilet roll there, like loads of it, an abundance of toilet roll. Um, and it was amazing how kind of excited I was to see it. It was crazy. And so it's like I said the other day, it's this scarcity mentality, and Rory Sutherland talks about this and talks about how in maths and in economics things are quite straightforward. 2 plus 2 equals 4, for example, but in psychology 2 plus 2 can equal more than 4 or less than 4 if you want it to. And he talks about alchemy in the way that if you want people to change things, then or for things to change even, then change people's psychology around it, which is really interesting. And it's this concept that he talks about throughout the book in different ways from different angles. Um, and so basically, one of the things he says is that when people see things as scarce, they put much more value on it. Obviously, gold, there doesn't seem to be. Gold is quite a scarce sort of metal, and diamonds and things like that. And toilet roll, obviously, wouldn't normally care less about it, but when you can't get it for how many weeks and people are emptying the shelves, suddenly it becomes more valuable, and people are selling it online completely immorally and whatever else, but that's a separate subject. So yeah, that was kind of what inspired me to do this review today, because I've read this a little while ago and I've been meaning to do it for some time. But he just makes some really interesting points. He talks about placebos, how they're really powerful, how they're underrated, how they're cheap, they're effective, they're proven to work, they have no side effects. He mentions painkillers, and he says how, fair enough, 50, 70p for a pack of ibuprofen or paracetamol or whatever, but occasionally I've got a headache that's worth £4.90, so I'll go for the more expensive stuff. And it's kind of this point that if we believe something to be better and more expensive, then the chances are it's going to work better. And placebo effect does work, has been proven scientifically to work. So it's quite astonishing, really. And I think that almost that point alone kind of justifies what he's talking about, I think. He also mentions the fact, which links into a lot of other stuff we've talked about on this channel, he mentions the fact that decision making is driven by system one thinking, which is kind of your emotion, your feeling, like the lymphatic system, rather than system two thinking, which is the logical brain. So the logical brain thinks it's in charge, as we've talked about before, but it really isn't. You're actually a slave to your emotions, to your physicality, the way your body reacts. And so when he's talking about marketing and selling things to people, it's appealing to people's emotions far more than their logic. So people are far more likely to buy into something that is less likely to be a catastrophe for them than to buy something that is going to be absolutely fantastic or top notch. So they tend to go somewhere in the middle. He calls it satisficing. So satisficing, you're going for something that's kind of good enough, that does the job kind of reliably, but isn't necessarily the best possible solution, because you want to get that balance. You're kind of scared that actually if you take a chance and go for the thing that you might think potentially could be the very best, could end up to be a complete failure. So that was quite an interesting point he makes as well. And this idea about the emotional brain versus the logical brain, system one and system two, is something that Daniel Kahneman's written a lot about, talks a lot about, and his book is called, for the life of me now, why can't I remember it? Why do I always forget stuff when I'm doing these reviews? Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. That's the one. That's been out for a few years now, and it's one that I intend to read at some point. I've been meaning to read it for absolutely ages, but I keep getting distracted by other books. There's so many books out there, so it's difficult. But I will read it at some point and do a review. But I'm sure there's loads of reviews anyway. It's something it's quite a famous book. It's pretty highly recommended. But yeah, Rory Sutherland talks about all these different things. He talks about Red Bull and how if you were to get together and have a meeting to discuss bringing out a drink to rival Coca-Cola, you'd probably be forgiven for saying things like, okay, so it needs to come in a bigger bottle to represent more value. It needs to taste at least as good, if not better. Those sorts of things. Whereas actually, you look at Red Bull, you could argue it tastes pretty disgusting. Even people who drink it would argue that it's not a particularly pleasant taste. It's quite medicinal. It's a bit weird. It comes in a tiny can, which actually kind of suggests that maybe because it's so powerful that you can't have too much of it. So that actually works on human psychology as well. It comes in this small little can because you can't have too much. And they are, they're huge. They're marketing. They're sponsoring Formula One. They're doing all sorts of stuff. So it's these kind of ideas that don't seem to make sense, that really do. It's kind of this idea, the opposite of a good idea. You might think is a bad idea, but often it's a better idea. He kind of says, and he talks about in some of his interviews on YouTube as well, which I find really interesting. Because I'm very interested in careers and obviously success and personal development and stuff. But he talks about how companies so often make the mistake of they've got these jobs available for people and they expect the people to fit the job roles. Whereas actually what they should be doing is looking for the best talent they can possibly find and then looking at how they can shape the job role around that person to get the best out of that person. Likewise, if you're an employee in a company and you are an ideas man or woman, and you're someone who has these fantastic ideas, the chances are you'll probably have some fairly crappy ideas as well. And Rory says that in an interview. Someone says to him, do you have any crap ideas? And he says, yeah, very often, lots of crap ideas. So successful people, like we said before, fail a lot before they become successful. So if you're an ideas man or woman, like I say, you might have some fantastic ideas, but alongside that, you're probably going to have some crap ones as well. You're probably going to do a few crap things. So employers are far less likely to take a chance on you through their own fear and insecurity than they would on Billy Boring Bastard who just does what he's supposed to do, turns up on time, brown noses the boss, says the right things at the right time, never going to do anything amazing to move the company on, but just does what he's supposed to do. So you're likely to be penalised for being kind of more of a genius type, someone more creative potentially. And that's something that as time goes by, those sorts of companies that don't take risks are the ones that are going to die out because businesses don't last as many years as they used to. And the businesses, for businesses to last nowadays, they have to be innovative, they have to be reinventing themselves, they have to be taking chances, they have to be developing their staff, tapping into their staff's higher values, their abilities, their interests. Companies that just kind of ignore that in their staff, they talk about it like they understand it, but actually all they're doing is just creating a staff team of people who are just irritated, bored, doing what they're supposed to do to just sort of keep the money coming in. They're disempowered. The company isn't going to last. It's going to go out of business. That's practically a fact. The best companies, some of these ones you hear in America, I can't think of any off the top of my head. There's a bike company out in America, I think it might be San Francisco, where the staff took over and they have an equal share in the business. They all do an equal amount of work. They get rid of the sort of men at the top who just sort of cream it off and they just share the money between them. None of them earn anything crazy, but they earn an equal amount, and so they all have a vested interest, and it works. But it's these companies, and there's loads more besides, but it's these companies that have this forward-thinking, this innovative approach that will last longer. They're able to be flexible, they're able to reinvent themselves, they're able to take risks on risky ideas that, when you take a chance and you get it wrong, as long as you're able to learn from it, pick yourself up and carry on, which we talk about a lot on this channel, then you can improve, you can do really well. So this book is absolutely fantastic, really relevant to anyone who is interested in personal development. I'm assuming if you're watching this and you've watched it this far, you are. If you're into business, being self-employed, entrepreneurship, fantastic book. It just gives a bit of a different angle. It draws on a few different things that people have kind of talked about before, but it is quite original. Rory Sutherland's quite an original character. He's really worth listening to. If you don't read the book, I would say it's a 4.5-star book. And that is high praise. I'd only give 5 stars to something absolutely sublime, but so it's 4.5 stars. If you don't have time to read the book or listen to it, then listen to some of his stuff on YouTube. He's quite interesting. It's definitely worthwhile. Highly recommended.